Last summer, we hosted one of our Vision to Action Town Hall meetings on developing a plan or strategy for transportation in both the town and city of Plattsburgh, as well as surrounding communities. Phil von Bargen is the head of the planning department in the town of Plattsburgh and is our guest at the roundtable this week. Welcome. Nice to have you here.
Thank you.
Being a smaller city in a more rural area, when we looked at our public transportation, we weren't talking about building new highways or rail, but we were looking at improving roads and streets really that we already have, maybe looking at some new roads or streets. But instead of major traffic tie-ups, much of the focus was on improving what we have, making it better for people who live here. And I guess that's what we're here to talk about now. A big part of that was creating a network that allows people to bike or walk in areas on existing streets or on new streets that we're building. And that's something that the town of Plattsburgh is dealing with right now.
The town of Plattsburgh, through its planning process of a comprehensive plan several years ago, identified that the built environment associated with walking and biking was a value that should be looked at carefully. One of the recommendations was to create a committee that would serve as a guiding committee to the town board. That was done last summer in conjunction with the Vision to Action efforts to put attention on walking and biking as part of our community. And with that, the committee has been working to really essentially advocate still in this early stage with walking and biking and drawing together a network of people who are putting in attention, who can put attention onto that built environment. So you're correct in the sense that the emphasis is on what's existing and then perhaps improving that and going from there.
What exists now, is it sufficient or is it woefully inadequate for folks as far as the number of bike paths and trails that we have now and bike paths and trails that are interconnected?
I think one of our challenges is that distinction between walking and biking in terms of when we ask is there enough, it would depend on perhaps the type of user. If you're in a neighborhood that has a sidewalk, then maybe that's sufficient for a young family with a child that's maybe 5 or 7 years old, got training wheels on their bicycle, and they're just riding up and down the street. For a commuter who lives maybe in Morrisonville to bike into the city of Plattsburgh, maybe it's still not the best infrastructure yet for that. So I think we've got to break it down. We have a series of different responsibilities for our road system, for our public spaces in our road systems. So you have state highways, you have county highways, and you have local highways, and then you may even have some private highways. So you have these different disparate agencies that are responsible for our built environment. New York State Route 9, for example, is a bikeway that goes all the way from the southern part of the state up to the Canadian border. There will be portions of that that are very well developed for bike lanes. And then there will be other sections that you have barely any paved shoulder surface whatsoever for a bicyclist.
And I think Route 9 is a good example. We brought that up during the Vision to Action program that we had. You'll go from the town of Plattsburgh, where there are bike paths on both sides of Route 9, or also the shoulders are certainly wide enough for bikes, and then that narrows down as you come into the city of Plattsburgh and it goes to 4 lanes. There's no place for the bikes to go, and oftentimes they're forced to go off on the sidewalks.
So one of the things that we haven't really done in our area, in our region, is to look at the interfaces of where we change from one jurisdiction or one agency to another. And we haven't really, in bicycling, for example, we haven't looked at where should we be placing our attention to. You know, we can't do everything. So we need to maybe perhaps focus on certain areas and getting attention to them, or making people more aware perhaps that this road may be more suitable than that road. Take Route 374, for example. Mm-hmm. High speed, but my goodness, it's got 8 feet wide pavement on both sides of it for a good distance. So we do have resources here that exist that are adequate. Maybe some of it's just getting attention and awareness to people to be understand that, and then identify places that really need to be given attention. I think one of the best interfaces is you were talking about perhaps on Route 3, where you come from down through the commercial corridor onto Cornelia Street. You come to and this is nothing about the city of Plattsburgh. It's just the reality that the state highway system has the sidewalk on both sides. You come down to that interface between the city of Plattsburgh and the town of Plattsburgh, and all of a sudden there's no sidewalk. So if you're a college student at Plattsburgh State and you want to walk up to Texas Roadhouse, for example, you don't have a sidewalk system that will get you up on Cornelia Street.
And for bikers, that's obviously dangerous to go from a street where you have space to then where you're mixed right in with the traffic. And it's not a very wide street at that, Cornelia Street, as you're coming down off Route 3.
So maybe there's a better route, Ruger Street perhaps, where maybe simple improvements could be made on Ruger Street. Just for example, the city of Plattsburgh, with a can of paint, created a bike lane on Ruger Street down through the college. You know, that's an example of by paying attention and going for low-hanging fruit, the roadway width was sufficient from curb to curb to be able to take and stripe out an area that designated it for bicyclists.
And is this a number of things that your committee is looking at, not only what roads, but roads that perhaps town of Plattsburgh and city of Plattsburgh and other municipalities can work together on to create a safe route for pedestrians and bicyclists over a longer distance going from town to town?
Absolutely, and I think that's been one of the challenges for this committee as it's come together and formed is, you know, what can they concentrate on? So they've been, this committee has been primarily in a networking relationship building kind of process, along with working with the town of Plattsburgh highway superintendent to identify, again, some low-hanging fruit that he can work on. And so there's a working relationship between the committee and the town highway superintendent.
Tell us about Complete Streets. We've heard about that. What is that?
Yes. Complete Streets is across the country. It's a concept of making our roads, public road spaces, safe for all users, regardless of age or ability. So going from a grandparent who might be someplace with their grandchild, trying to cross an intersection, up to an individual like me who wears Lycra and spandex on my bicycle, and I ride really fast and I don't mind riding in traffic. So, and it's also for the motorist as well, so that the road system will be safe for that interface between the motorist driving down the road in a vehicle and a walker or a biker.
Does Complete Streets offer grant money to encourage the development of walking paths and bike paths? Does it offer blueprints or ideas like some of the challenges you're facing? How do you go from community to community or from very busy highways to find safe routes throughout the rest of the community? In
transportation money these days and planning dollars that are available on a grant basis, they're getting to be less and less. It's getting very difficult in many cases to go seeking grants. But that Complete Streets concept has been moved into a legislative direction at the state of New York. And what it does is it doesn't mandate that any road improvement that you do, that you have to do this or do that. But what it does say is you have to, in the design process or in the consideration of the improvements that are going to be made, if you're using state money, you've got to give attention to the walker and the biker, for example, which in the past, many transportation engineers really had their mindset on vehicles and not on walkers and bikers. So it kind of changes the dialogue that projects that may be that are going to occur, whether there's a funding stream or whether it's a local tax dollars or whatever it might be, that consideration be given so that people will have a stronger voice that improvements will be made. And the town of Plattsburgh has tried to work on some aspects with grant dollars moving in the direction of the planning phase. It's a lot harder to get into the built environment aspect.
So this is for state highways, for example. So if Route 3 is widened or Route 9 in the town of Plattsburgh with Complete Streets, the designers, the engineers, the construction companies need to think about how to incorporate bike paths and pedestrian walks as part of that.
I think that there's an excellent example that everybody could see quite quickly is over here right here on Tom Miller Road at the overpass on the Northway. that if you look at that when you drive through or cross the Northway there, you're going to see that there's a sidewalk on both sides. There's a sidewalk that connects from Quarry Road down to Prospect, and that it's a well-designed pedestrian bicyclist improvements that were made as part of that project, along with crosswalk signalization and striping on the pavement for the crosswalks themselves. So that's an example. So there's coming up next year will be the bridge replacement in Morrisonville, the Big Green Bridge. Same kind of thing. In the design stage for that, the engineers are incorporating into the design project improvements that will be sufficient and safe for walkers and bikers.
So it doesn't have to be a state highway, but if it's a state bridge, for example, and it's a reconstruction project for that bridge, in this case, the town of Plattsburgh on Tom Miller Road was able to get those improvements made.
Right. Well, in that case, those were improvements that were part of a state project. They weren't really local projects. Right. You know, and we should add too that the county, Clinton County legislature has also adopted Complete Streets policy resolution, again with the intent to have projects and allow the community to be able to say, hey, look, what about the walking and biking part of our highway projects that we have? And then in addition, the town of Plattsburgh has done this as well. The town board recently adopted a resolution embracing Complete Streets concepts. So there's this concerted effort at various levels of government to at least acknowledge and say, look, we're just not going to forget about the walking and biking component of our public roadways.
Has the city bought into this, or is that part of the challenge to get other communities around the town of Plattsburgh to sign on to this as well?
Well, I think that that's one of the elements of this symposium, is to try to get other communities in the area to be aware that that they could follow a pathway similar to the town of Plattsburgh, create a local committee that then the town board would acknowledge and have a relationship with. And so that hasn't yet occurred in the city of Plattsburgh. I would suspect that perhaps this symposium might help move in that direction.
And when you talk about the symposium, that's coming up next Tuesday, October 15th. Tell us what that's about and what you're hoping to do during the day-long event at Clinton Community College.
It's mostly an awareness and advocacy kind of program. It'll be 4 hours long. We have Velo Quebec. If we all remember, Velo Quebec came down 3 years ago and brought 2,000 cyclists through Plattsburgh for a couple of days. We see the Canadians coming down here across the border on their bicycles constantly. Quebec has a bicycling advocacy group called Velo Quebec. So our keynote speaker is going to be somebody from Velo Quebec, and he's going to be speaking about the culture of biking and that relationship between the society and the built environment around it. So we've got that for a keynote speaker. We've got Josh Wilson from the New York Bicycling Coalition, who's going to sit in on a panel discussion with Bob Light from the SUNY Police Department, who has been doing education in the community, mostly to the younger people in our community. And then a planning group called Chazen Engineering, and they're going to be talking about how Complete Streets falls into breaking it down into engineering, education, and enforcement. Mm-hmm. So those are going to be the two big parts of it. And then we're going to have a panel discussion with Kevin Farrington, myself, and Rodney Brown, bringing it down a little more to the local level in terms of what's going on locally.
Now, you mentioned a few moments ago about people possibly commuting from, say, Morrisonville into Plattsburgh, and is there a real demand these days to have interconnected routes that go from one community to another? Are more people looking to, if not go for long distance bike rides, use these routes to commute to work if possible?
Let's speak of it both nationally or internationally and locally. We know very well that nationally and internationally that bicycling as a means of transportation is growing rapidly in the last 10 years. Here in our local area, we're seeing increasing numbers of people commuting. It's still a small percentage. Part of it, I think, is the aspect of, again, culture. You know, does your workplace have a means for you to come into work and be able to change your clothes or whatever you might have to do to freshen up after biking in, 10 or 15 miles to work? We know that there is a demand there. If, for example, there was a nice commuter route along the Saranac River, I would suspect that there would be an increase in number of people that would use that as a means of commuting in and out of Plattsburgh. And that's an important part of bicycling and pedestrian improvements, is to encourage that increase and shift some of that transportation demand off of the highway onto some other system, whether it's public transportation or bicycling. So we're seeing an increase in it, but there's the health aspect of it too, that people clearly are interested in, enhancing their health and wellness today, and bicycling is a great way of doing that.
And walking also, obviously.
And walking is, the walking part, I love to think about, we use the intersection of Smithfield Boulevard and Route 3, the busiest intersection north of Queensbury, Glens Falls area. We are seeing with the hotels that are there and with the Canadian traffic that's coming down, people staying in that area, and they are walking to their shopping place or they're walking to the place that they're dining. And we're just seeing an increase in walking occurring in that area. And of course, we know what it is down in the downtown area. It's a very important part of the city, is being able to walk from your neighborhood to downtown or through downtown.
And beyond improving the quality of life for the people who live in the area, there are economic aspects, and Velo Quebec may be an example of that, that if you have a good network within the area, it draws in tourists, it draws in potentially groups of bikers that can be a boost to the economy.
It can be a very powerful part of our community. As we know, the Destination Master Plan for Clinton County through the Tourism Bureau has a focus on cycling. And probably a lot of people may not have caught this, but just 2 weeks ago in the New York Times, there was on the Sunday Review, there was an article about 3 favorite rides. Now, the New York Times can go ahead and write about anything that they want. So the 3 rides, one was in Ireland, one was in France. The other one went right through downtown Plattsburgh. And so it was a writer from Burlington, and he rode from Burlington down to the Essex Ferry, Charlotte Ferry, took it over to Essex, rode from Essex up to the Highlands Road, came into Keysville, up Route 9, into Plattsburgh, through Plattsburgh, downtown Plattsburgh, out to Cumberland Head, to the ferry, connected out onto Grand Isle, and then took the causeway because they have the bike ferry in the summertime. That's right. This is the New York Times is featuring our area as one of the go-to places to ride your bike in the world.
That's fantastic. And along that route, at any point did that writer say, this is a great ride, but there's one stretch here that was a challenge or wasn't so great, and did he offer any trouble areas that the community may focus on and say, yeah, this is a great route, but we still have some progress to make here?
Well, I mentioned that it was an article that was written by a Burlington writer, and we've run into this in the past with Burlington writers looking at Plattsburgh. And so the writer didn't look so much at the infrastructure of our area, because actually we do have a great state highway system. And we're giving more attention to these details. Mm-hmm. But what he did talk about was coming into Plattsburgh on a Sunday morning and through downtown and not really being able to find a place that he could stop and rest. And so I think that speaks a lot about the potential that we've got from a business standpoint here.
And when you talk about paying for all of this, and there not being money maybe for grant money out there to help do this, are highway projects such now that you can incorporate a lot of this without really adding to the price tag? Or is it still that to add the bike lanes and to make it biker and pedestrian friendly, you add quite a bit onto the cost of these repaving projects or road projects?
I think that the answer is that it can be expensive. And that's why the low-hanging fruit is so important, to look at what the obvious things are and work with maybe in some areas where just simple widening of a paved shoulder might be sufficient, and the use of paint to go ahead and make that travel way safer. Sidewalks can become more expensive when you start putting in sidewalks and doing them correctly. The balance, though, is looking at it from both a quality standpoint of what it means to your community and the gains that you're going to get through health and economy and recreation and business versus the cost of doing it.
So what are you hoping to see over the next 5 years develop as far as projects? Where would you like town of Plattsburgh and the larger community to be in 5 years when it comes to improving biking and pedestrian lanes and highways?
I think that what's important is to develop a network of people who are looking in both their neighborhood and their community, and then that connection between the communities themselves to see where the attention needs to be given. There are specific neighborhoods, for example, in the town of Plattsburgh, that could be given some attention, that deserve it. And then there's the grander thought of, again, thinking about the college as this nucleus of young people and trying to make their way into, let's call it uptown Plattsburgh, going west and not taking anything away from the downtown portion, but making that connection, for example, from Ruger Street onto Ampersand and Sorrel and connecting over to Route 3. Mm-hmm. And so you've got that whole populated area of residential in the west end of the city of Plattsburgh and the college, and then trying to make that connectivity between Ruger Street and Route 3, and then paying attention to the Route 3 area where we know that walking is increasing because of the business that's there, and making that safer so that people can cross from one side of the road to the other side.
And the symposium, again, this coming Tuesday, folks can go online or call to get more information?
They certainly can, and they can give our office a call. We're trying to do a media blitz right now and getting the word out around the community. We've reached out to a lot of stakeholders, a number of different agencies, as well as offices, political representatives, for example, to participate in this. So we're really looking forward to drawing in as many people as we can.
So you're bringing together for the symposium a lot of stakeholders, but you don't have to be a stakeholder. The public's certainly welcome and invited to come and hear all about this and
more than welcome to join us. I think that the challenge for us is that we've got information that we're going to be providing in the symposium, but and then we're going to have this small roundtable between Rodney Brown, Kevin Farrington, and myself talking about our respective municipalities, but tying it all together at the end so that people who come in can feel like I learned something. I see that there are things going on in the community. There are many different agencies or organizations that are working toward making this a better community, but what do we do next? And I hope that that's one of the things that we'll be able to pull together in the end.
Phil von Bargen with the town of Plattsburgh. Thank you very much for taking the time.
Thanks, Tom.